Kelly Ripa's painful surgery. Why Mark Consuelos' words on live meant so much more. Sometimes the most revealing moments on live television aren't the ones that were planned. They're the ones where a husband, sitting at a desk in front of millions of people, forgets for a second that he's supposed to be delivering a smooth transition, and instead just tells the truth. That's essentially what happened this week on Live with Kelly and Mark, when Mark Consuelos opened the show without his co-host, without his partner of more than 3 decades, sitting beside him. Kelly Ripa wasn't there. And instead of glossing over it with a scripted line, Mark did something that felt, to a lot of longtime viewers, remarkably human. He just talked about it. He explained that Kelly had undergone a gum graft, a dental procedure most people have never heard of unless they've been through it themselves, and one that involves taking tissue and using it to repair receding gums. He shared that her dentist had actually warned her about this years earlier, and that Kelly, in typical Kelly fashion, had joked back then that she didn't expect to still be sitting behind that desk 5 years later. It's a small detail, almost thrown away in the retelling, but it says something bigger about who she is. Someone who has spent years trying to outrun her own to-do list, even when her body was quietly asking for a break. And then came the line that stopped people in their seats. Mark said that this recovery hurt more than usual, and that he knew it was bad because Kelly famously doesn't complain about pain. She reportedly skips the numbing shots at the dentist's office. She's the kind of person who treats discomfort as an inconvenience to push through rather than something to sit with. So when her own husband, someone who has watched her go through childbirth 3 times without so much as flinching on camera, says he can tell this one is different, that lands differently for an audience who has spent years watching this couple bicker, tease, and occasionally bare their souls in front of a studio audience. It's worth pausing here because this is really the heart of why this story spread the way it did. It wasn't really about a dental procedure. It was about what that procedure revealed. Viewers have long sensed that underneath the banter and the perfectly timed jokes, there's a real partnership between these two, the kind built on decades of actually knowing someone, not just performing closeness for a camera. And in a strange way, watching Mark step in to explain his wife's absence, worry a little out loud about her pain, and playfully admit he was struggling to get her to actually follow doctor's orders, gave people a glimpse of the relationship they've always suspected was there. Not the polished, talk show version of a marriage. The real one, the one where you're trying to keep your spouse from checking on their own stitches because they're too curious and too stubborn to just rest. That detail, in particular, seemed to resonate with a lot of people online. Mark described how Kelly kept wanting to inspect the surgical site herself, and how he ended up doing an awkward little check for her rather than letting her strain to see it in a mirror. It's such a small, almost silly moment. But it's also deeply familiar to anyone who has spent real years with another person. The way caretaking during illness or recovery often isn't dramatic at all. It's mundane. It's a little bit funny. It's someone saying, "Let me look," so the other person doesn't have to hurt themselves trying. There's something quietly moving about a couple who has been doing live television together for years still finding new, small ways to reveal their marriage to an audience without ever seeming like they're trying to. Kevin Jonas, who stepped in as a guest host that day, added his own version of the same idea, joking about how his wife Danielle also tends to downplay her own pain, only for him to discover later that something was seriously wrong. It became, briefly, a shared conversation between two husbands about the particular blend of admiration and helplessness that comes with loving someone who refuses to admit when they're hurting. Many longtime fans of the show pointed out that this isn't the first time Kelly and Mark have used their platform to talk candidly about their bodies, their health, and the physical toll of getting older. Something they've done with humor rather than discomfort. A couple of years back, Mark famously joked that recovering from foot surgery had been more painful than watching Kelly go through 3 C-sections, a bit that only works because they've built years of trust with their audience. They can say things like that, half serious and half teasing, because viewers already understand the deep respect underneath the joke. That's really the through line here. It almost seemed like this particular moment worked precisely because it wasn't trying to be a big reveal. Mark wasn't making an announcement. He was simply telling his audience the truth about why the chair next to him was empty, the same way you'd explain it to a friend who asked where your spouse was. And there's something in that ease, that willingness to be plainly honest on live television without turning it into a performance, that keeps drawing people back to this particular couple morning after morning, year after year. It also says something about how audiences relate to marriage itself. Kelly and Mark have been open for years about the ordinary friction of a long partnership. Who annoys who forgets what, who handles pain better. What makes this recent moment different is the tenderness underneath it. Mark wasn't teasing Kelly for complaining. He was almost defending her silence, explaining that if she was finally admitting something hurt, it must genuinely hurt, because that's simply not her nature. For a couple who built a career on gentle ribbing and comedic timing, that shift into quiet concern lands with more weight than any dramatic announcement could. There's also something worth sitting with in the fact that Kelly, a woman who talks for a living, who has spent her career filling silences with quick wit and rapid-fire conversation, was suddenly under doctor's orders not to speak. For a performer whose whole identity is built around being present, being heard, being quick on her feet in front of an audience, that kind of enforced quiet feels almost symbolic. It's a reminder that even the most familiar, most talkative faces on our screens are still just people whose bodies sometimes need them to stop and heal, whether they're ready to or not. It's easy to reduce a story like this to a headline about a talk show host missing a few episodes for a dental procedure. But if you've followed Kelly and Mark for any length of time, you know their appeal was never really about the segments or the celebrity guests. It's about the sense that you're watching two people who genuinely like each other navigate a life together in real time, imperfections and all. A missed week of television, explained honestly by a slightly worried husband, is just one more small chapter in that ongoing story, one that reminds viewers why they keep tuning back in. Kelly is expected to be back at that desk before long, with a rotating cast of guest hosts keeping her seat warm in the meantime. And when she returns, it's a safe bet the first few minutes of that show won't be about ratings or scripted banter. They'll probably be about this, about the recovery, about Mark's overprotectiveness, about the version of this story only Kelly herself can tell. Maybe that's the real reason so many people remain invested in this couple after all these years. It was never just about two hosts sharing a desk. It's the sense that audiences are watching something genuine, a marriage playing out honestly, in public, one ordinary and occasionally painful moment at a time. What did you think when you heard Mark talk about this on the show? Do you think it's this kind of honesty that keeps people coming back to Kelly and Mark year after year? Let us know in the comments which moment between the two of them has stuck with you the most.